Hey everybody, and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program RP-0. We are once again out at our tiny bus stop station, not yet taken the poll, or by the time you're watching this we will have taken the poll, but as of this recording I have not taken the poll to name it. I will probably list it either in the description or somewhere down there. Anyway, we've got a little more work to do to this thing to get it to a state that I feel is a little bit more acceptable. So we're going to get started on that post haste. Anyway, it's going to fall to Catherine, to EVA, and hopefully we have not forgotten a tool. Oh, I bet you I did. Oh, hold on. Bingo. So he has a tool, she should have a tool. I should have checked that before switching. That would have made way more sense. Bingo. Equip. Fantastic. Alright, let's get to work. And with mighty DeWalt in hand, Catherine Wagner will set out to make some improvements here to Kawaii Protato Station, as was the winner by vote. We'll start by relocating this docking port to the very lowest extremity of the station, where I think we're going to relocate our solar array to, so as to keep it as clear of the docking everything as possible. Just a little trouble trying to get it to snap to a node. Yeah, as you see, that's mighty crooked and just not going to work for us very well. So we will try to realign. Hopefully we can get something to snap to a node by mashing keys randomly until we find the one that works. And there it is, bingo. Now she will just grab hold of the handrails and wait for a few minutes as we transfer all of the life support supplies from that very top node of the station into anything else. We need it empty so it's light enough for her to move around on her own without, we don't have a disposal unit out here or a candidate arm or really Infernal Robotics, anything, because this needs to avoid the Kraken whenever possible. I'm also going to take this as an opportunity to balance the life support load of those two tanks stowed inside the SKS Mark II. I would really hate for one of them to have more in it than the other when it comes time for descent, which would cause a terrible listing problem that I'd just rather not deal with. So we'll basically pump them empty and then try to equalize their load, and then it's back to Catherine here to detach this tank so that we can make this station connected living space compliant. She'll give it a little kick because that is the effective method of moving things around in space before we can relocate it to the rear of the cargo bay, hopefully before it goes flying off into space. There we go. It just snaps handily to our readily available docking port. And now we will procure one of our other docking ports, hopefully by actually attaching it to something and not letting it drift off aimlessly into space, although we do have a second one we can use. And then we will detach it and grab it and propel ourselves to the other end of the cargo bay until we are suitably underneath our Kawaii Protato station, and then attach it to the top of our habitat module eventually. First we'll drop it, and then recollect it eventually before attaching it directly to the node. Now that should make this station connected living space compliant, as long as we can get the docking hub on that top port. But with the job outside complete, Catherine will return to the interior of the shuttle itself, and then we can turn the job over to our automated tug drone for the relocation of the solar panels and some reconfiguring of the docking hub assembly before we move it into its actual location. First, we'll start off by retracting these panels because I have a tendency to bang into things, and I'd really prefer not to break those before detaching ourselves from the station and then moving ourselves around to the, I guess, the back, the pill, bottom, life support tank, and then try to get ourselves swung into position, which of course causes lots of chaos with such incredibly off-center, off-balance RCS placement, but it's not a struggle that I am unused to. It's just one you have to be patient with most of the time, I guess. Anyway, I figured out some method for it. It's not the best method, obviously, but it is functional, and that's really what passes the grade these days. Good enough for government work. Used to be a compliment, turns out. Anyway, so trying to take my time and line things up as precisely as possible to perform this docking so that I don't have to go through it 7 or 8 times like I had to do on a live stream with a live audience and people laughing at me, etc., etc. This would be almost good enough, but not quite on a first pass attempt. But we're just gonna kind of eventually start to try to brute force it. It will start a rotation with the whole dang thing, which does go about making things a little bit more interesting. Such hubris I had in not putting RCS ports on this station in a want to save on part count, trying to keep it as low as humanly possible. Yeah, it would have been a good idea to include something like that. As you can see, we've rotated it almost 90 degrees at this point, for we will just back off and try to meter how much rotation we have. It's lots. So we'll try to use the shuttle's RCS to stabilize things. It doesn't work very well, so we'll just hit the time warp key. Although the shuttle's RCS would have been more than enough to stabilize this. I mean, just look at the size difference between the two. Were this station empty and were its footprint enough to fit, it could have been carried up in exactly 1 launch, not 2, as we have done so far. That one was obviously a bad approach, but I thought maybe if we can just get closer, we'll nail it. And there it is. The solar panel assembly is reattached. Now, of course, I'm going to have to go back and detach it again later and rotate it about 30 degrees or so to keep the solar panels from interfering with the next phase of docking, or anything else for that matter. Anything long docked along the docking ports might hit something were it to approach from the wrong side. Anyway, I would like to make this docking assembly a lot less awkward, and that means switching this long tube to be exactly opposite the other long tube that is currently connected to the station. Basically, we're going to make a perfect T-pose out of our docking assembly before relocating it to the top of the habitation module for connected living space compliance. And we'll try to get this approach as on point as possible. It goes exactly as well as you would expect. Magnets kind of keeping us close, but not quite close enough. We do have to adjust our heading a little bit before we do get hard dock. Fantastic. And then we will detach the tube from the hub itself. All these docking ports, not the greatest for part count, but modularizing is the word I'm trying to pronounce unsuccessfully. Does have its benefits. So, trying to line ourselves up. This is not going to be easy because we're rotated a little bit, and I think the station is very, very slowly spinning away from us. Yeah, you can see the shuttle's nose tipping up a little bit, which does go altering our approach, so we'll try to back ourselves out just a little bit before realigning, and hopefully we can just compensate for this rotation. It seems like it should be slow enough to where we might be able to just angle it in, provided we can get a good contact, which is not from this pass, so I'll try to adjust our axis of motion and then realign, target angle in, adjust for easy axis of motion again, and then try to tip this thing right on top of the node. Yeah, off by that angle a little bit, but I think we can adjust this on the fly. Magnets docked. Perfect. Now, that is how the docking assembly should look. It is just in the wrongiest of wrong places. Surprise, surprise. And go ahead and re-extend these solar panels, at least for the time being. We would like to recharge some batteries at some point. But none too shabby, actually. None too shabby at all. Now, we will relocate the tug one more time. We would like to get it kind of on the center of that docking hub. Now, I do plan on having one of the short connectors be the means that it attaches to the top of the habitation module, so you don't think I'm going to try to plant this thing on there flat, because that would be a little silly as far as clearances are concerned. It will extend away from the station by one of those short tubes, so the two long tubes extending out to either side. That should give us maximum reach for something as large as SKS, but we have the new Shuriken K coming down the pipeline from a contract builder very soon. I really am very, very excited to flight-proof that thing on my own. I've seen it in action on Wookie Goldberg's live streams, and it looks to be an absolutely amazing craft, and I really cannot wait to put it into service. There we will disembark the SKS, and I will turn you over to Old Me for the briefest of moments. Alright, well, we are going to disembark the shuttle and have them move away a little bit so that they can complete this contract. Doesn't register that we launched a new vessel because we docked with something. That's awesome. So we'll give them the specified 10 days after a quick F5, F9. We have one more thing. We're going to move the entire docking arm onto this docking port so that we can be connected living space compliant. And it was at this point when I was actually thinking about wrapping up the episode, realizing that that seems kind of silly, and I've got some time, so let's just carry it along. The next day or so, we pushed the shuttle off into the distance there. It just kind of drifted a little bit. Nothing really to get it there. It's just what we did. We will reattach our docking arm per our previous plans, which basically involved very carefully trying to move it very slowly around to the other side of the station here before trying to go for the off-axis of off-axis dockings. I wasn't very much concerned with orientation versus the hatches or the other two ports, although maybe I should have been, because that's where fuel tanks are going to be placed later. Those will probably have to come up on a DN series rocket, depending on their mass, or maybe we'll just send one up partially fueled, but that was actually the easiest, smoothest docking, I think, ever. And then SAS decided to go a little crazy and torque the whole station around for no apparent reason whatsoever. We were docked. It had no need to move around, but yet, here we are. So anyway, it occurs to me that we should probably rotate the solar panel assembly to make sure that it is clear of the long docking arms, as those will be where shuttles will dock. The short docking arms, or even the flush docking ports, will be where things like an Artemis or a Perseus could dock. Should we ever actually need to deploy those to the station? It's not exactly in the flight plan for this station's service life, but it would be useful to know that they have a place to dock where we could actually put more docking extenders on those flushed ports, and maybe consider putting fuel tanks out on those. Maybe even keeping them flush. Anyway, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, and there was probably the cleanest docking ever done. And now we just need to rotate this, which means, of course, we're going to drift off axis. Make sure that we can set as target and try to keep these panels oriented in the direction we would like. Yeah, no, nothing is ever as smooth as you would like. Nearing the end of my patience with this whole thing at this point, but it did require a quick back off. And of course I can't rotate around to where we have easy access of translation, because I need to keep the panels oriented in a very specific way, and I'm not about to go through 3 dockings when I could just do 2. Unfortunately, I have not improved in my skills with docking with all of this extra docking practice, but we do, in fact, eventually get those solar panels oriented correctly, and here is the Kawaii Protato in its more or less ready for service life format. We just need a fuel tank, a moon bus, and a crew to shuttle around somewhere. And speaking of shuttles, back to the SKS now, where we are starting our prep for moving into... No, we're not going to move into a lower orbit, because we are already in an orbit that should satisfy this contract, although despite the quick load, quick save, it still does not think that we launched a new vessel. But I'm going to play it mostly by the books, and I'm going to give them at least 10 days in orbit. I will probably end up force completing the contract once everyone is safe on the ground. And here's me not paying attention, probably watching something else, while not realizing that Kerbal Alarm Clock has kicked me out of Time Warp, and the contract is still not completing nor counting because we didn't launch a new vessel. Yeah, just one of those irritating glitches that happens with the contractor system thing that kind of irritates me. Like, why shouldn't I be able to spend 10 days in orbit docked to something if it meets all the other parameters? I did launch, in fact, a new vessel. No big deal. All right, and now it's time to try to line up our approach with Cape Canaveral. Once again, shooting for the dream of putting this thing down on some concrete that we actually intended to shoot for. So I'll start off by just making a prototype node, and I'm going to try putting it someplace over Mexico, full well knowing, oh yeah, the Earth rotates. We're probably going to have to move that. Maybe just a little bit. We're also going to have to adjust a little bit northward to bring us over Cape Canaveral, as our flight path will shift as we move around. And yeah, that node is going way out to sea, and I wish I had noticed it then, but I did not. So, facing a little above the node, deal with offset engines, we will light up our 4HA10 OMS system and make a burn while, yeah, that's me watching the Perry G shift ever further away from where I actually want it to be. Not the most ideal of situations, but didn't really occur to me that that is more attuned to a Cerberus approach, which has an incredibly long glide slope, and really it's kind of just like our approach last time that left us ditching in Louisiana. So we're going to shift some supplies around. I'm actually going to shift life support afterward, as I've been learning a whole lot about stability on reentry these past couple of weeks. I do want to get a little bit more weight lower over the butt of the spacecraft so that we can keep that butt down more than the 10 or 15 degrees that this thing kind of averages on its own. I do also want to shift tanks out of or shift fuel out of those two uppermost tanks. That's just for stability. I want to get the center of mass low and close to the wings. I will bring out atmospheric autopilot and tell it only to monitor side slip. This should give me authority over angle of attack and all other axes during our descent. I mean, that's like the plan-ish anyway. And then I'll start to get us oriented in for our final descent, close up the cargo bay, fold in the solar panels, check the map, and go, oh man, this periapsis has shifted. We need to plot another node just to shift our periapsis a little closer to Cape Canaveral, which involves a lot of pulling and tugging frantically at nodes. We also do need to shift northward by just a little bit, and that should do it. We'll put it in the Gulf. By the time we get there, it'll be over Mexico-ish. And at 150 some odd kilometers, we'll angle ourselves very desperately into this node and fire the engines, hopefully before we ever actually hit atmosphere, which would be super awesome. I don't know if these things are going to keep ullage once we start slowing down, or if we start falling in a normalized area. Anyway, time to shift a little bit of the fuel forward into this nose cone section. We're going to need that for stability later. Trying to get that last little bit of fuel out of those two OMS mount tanks. That is where fuel is pressurized for descent. And I would like them to be empty evenly, if at all possible, which means bringing up this other forward tank inside the cargo bay and just emptying the rest of the contents of that OMS mount into it. There we go, and I will keep the rearmost tank open so that I can shift fuel forward as we need more flight stability / nimbleness in the lower parts of the atmosphere in case we have to do some unorthodox maneuvering. But for the time being, we're just all going to leave it all shifted into the butt as much as we can and as low as we can. And I've switched control over to atmospheric autopilot because I'm lazy and was probably doing something with the baby. And all of this is pretty much automated. It is maintaining a pitch level that I am happy with so far. anyway, everything seems pretty good, although it does throw me through a bit of a loop a little bit later on. I did have some very interesting issues with atmospheric autopilot. We'll get to those in a little bit. Maybe I'll pick up on exactly when it happened. But anyway, we need to start shifting north by just a little bit. I'm going to wait until we're a little lower in the atmosphere and maybe a little bit slower. But it looks like we could actually we could probably benefit from slowing down by just a bit. But I didn't know it at this point. I still saw myself way out over the Pacific and thought, oh god, am I even going to make it there? Let's get that nose down a little bit and try to glide more than brake. That was the incorrect answer in this particular problem. But physics warped engage, atmospheric autopilot, handling all the stability, this thing just flies itself, which is a awesome benefit when you have a 3-week-old that eats, sleeps, and poops. Requires constant monitoring. It's fun, though. Sleep deprivation has made me a little delirious. But clearly we are not going to come down in the Pacific Ocean. We will make landfall very shortly. We still have lots of speed under our belt. And lots of time for which to make these corrections, but atmospheric autopilot does not want me to pull back on the stick, really, or adjust my heading even to be in line with prograde, which seems odd because it should be moderating side slip. So I will turn it off and re-engage SAS just for the time being, so we can get that nose up a little bit and we can start to bank the SKS northward. Just a little bit. A little change here will make a huge difference later in putting us down on an actual runway. This kind of targeting helps. Once we have the angle we would like, I'll turn atmospheric autopilot back on, turn SAS back off, and watch as thrusters overheat. The 2 overheat warnings towards the middle of the spacecraft are actually 2 struts that are inside the bay. There is just no saving them. Poof. And here goes the other one. Poof. Ablative struts, even when they're internal, it turns out. It's, it's a thing. It's totally within design parameters. Nothing to see here. Absolutely everything is fine. Yep, just double checking strut connectors that burned up. No big deal. We actually need more northward deflection. We'll just try to level the spacecraft out here for a little bit. We're obviously not getting too much done, but atmospheric autopilot wants me to not change anything. Yeah, we're still coming in pretty south, but I'm going to let us get a little bit deeper into the atmosphere before I try to make desperate changes to our flight path. No big deal. We're coming into the meat of the heat right now as we blaze across Texas, and Mexico. Please don't hurt me. And coming down into sub 5 kilometers per second. Now is when we can actually start to make serious banking maneuvers. The air density is thick enough. We should probably start to turn northward. It was somewhere around here where, after I will turn off atmospheric autopilot, I've decided a bunch of more nose up is what we need to help us slow down a little bit more effectively. Atmospheric autopilot will let us roll, but will not let me actually turn. I guess it has locked me out of rudder control so that I can't effectively manage this turn. So we'll just turn it off. Turn SAS back on and get back to this banking. And then turning atmospheric autopilot on, decided that it wanted to nose down a whole lot. Turn it on again. Yeah, it just pitches us straight down, which is exactly the opposite of what we want with all of this heating going on. So I will assume manual control of the spacecraft and start a very serious banking maneuver to get us angled northward, and it is pretty obvious now that we are going to overshoot. Still 3 kilometers per second as we're getting ready to cross into Florida territory, and we are really cooking. Still 40 kilometers altitude, so it's time to start our braking maneuvers, which basically means let's pitch up. We're still not in line with the runway yet, but we're very obviously going to fly past it, which is a problem because there's no land out there to land on. So we'll just adjust north, way north, and then start adjusting south, making S-turns to help bleed off some speed. And seeing as how we need a little bit more maneuverability than we need butt-down stability, we'll start pumping fuel into the cockpit fuel tank. And right below us, currently, is Cape Canaveral. Current speed 1.8 or so kilometers per second at 35 kilometers altitude. We're going to have to make an about face. So we'll just try to bleed off as much of the speed now as we can. We'll get ourselves diverted southward so that we can make a northward turn to start a runway approach at some point. But we still have a lot of speed to kill and a lot of altitude to bleed off. And the best way to do that is to just angle down just a little bit and go into a full 180-degree turn, hopefully without losing control of the spacecraft. Aircraft at this point, perhaps. But about face goes clean, and now if only we could see whereabouts the runway was, that'd be extra nice. Kind of just flying in the dark and going by my best guess of how much I recognize my surroundings. But I think it's the cloud cover obscuring a little bit of our view. We'll turn on the running lights. That'll also turn on the gear lights as we start to make our approach. And eventually, something slightly resembling a runway will come into view at some point. There she is. Bingo. And with that, I will turn you over to old me. Alright. There's our runway. Oh boy. We're still 270 some odd meters per second and really, really high. We're going to pick up a lot of speed on the way down here. And I guess that's wave crashing sounds? I really hope that's wave crashing sounds. Jaegor's at the flight stick today. This is not his first rodeo. I think he did our return to launch site abort, which I guess is the only other qualifying time we've put this thing down on our runway. It doesn't really count either, but current objective, get lower and get in line with the runway. Alright, yeah. We're going to make some more S-turns to try to bleed off some of this speed, because for as close as we are, we're only going to pick up speed trying to get down to the ground in time to land on this, and I don't think we've got enough momentum to carry us around for a second pass. High G. I mean, high G-ish, that's 5. Oh, coming out, 8G turn. This is our rock-solid crew. Alright, just a few more. Yeah. Hoo-ah. And, I don't know, I guess this is why I build things to have maneuverability. You never know when you need to do some weird things to... Oh, no, did I overdo it? 135 meters per second. Uh-oh. That is... Oh, that's real close to stall. Gear out. Locked. Alright. Come on, Jaeger. Yeah. That's not going to be a thing. So, sorry buddy, no engine burns to save us this time. Let's just get on approach, 120 meters per second. Oh, come on. Not yet. 43 meters off the deck. There's some launch clamps making noises. Climbing 115 meter per second. We're going to start falling like a brick here. Let's just get it over the asphalt, Jaeger. Oh, close up. 19. Oh, alright. You can land any second now. 101 meters per second. Oh! Okay. A little rough there. You know, can't blame you for being eager. Alright, brakes, brakes, brakes. Friction control. Bring us on in for a stop. And we're down. And stopped. Hallelujah. Hey, look at that. We brought it back to the runway. Yes! Boom! Oh, that's the first SKS to legit land on this runway. Ever, I think? And man, look at that parking job. That's brilliant. We can just pull it right back into the spaceplane hangar and get it ready for retrofit. A little nail bitey there, but nailed it. Yes. Oh, that was awesome. I almost want to screen cap this, but I feel like it would ruin if this was the thumbnail. But, oh, I have to. That's awesome. Alright, well, that's going to do it for this one, everybody. Thank you so much for hanging out. I really do appreciate it, and I will see all of you in the next one. Oh, I want to know how much money I got back for recovering all of this stuff. So let's do that first. Please, no crashes. Why didn't I quick save? No science. 106,000 funds recovered. Brilliant. That makes up a huge chunk of our launch costs. Not quite half, I think. Not bad. Did we get money? We had 0 funds for the oxygen, hydrogen, 1 fund. 1 fund for the nitrogen tetroxide, 8 funds for the aerosine, none for the oxygen, 2 for the water, interestingly, and 66 for the food. That's very interesting indeed. Not bad. Successful flight. And our new engineer, Catherine Wagner, has advanced to level 1. Not a bad start. Alright, for real this time, that's going to do it for this episode, everybody. Thank you so much for hanging out. I really do appreciate it, and I will see all of you in the next one. So until then, see you later.